The air conditioning in the lawyer's office was too cold. Simone could feel goosebumps rising on her arms as she watched Brandon scrawl his signature across the divorce papers with the same pen he'd used to sign their marriage certificate 7 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. His hand moved quickly, confidently, like he couldn't wait to be done with her. Like their marriage had been nothing more than a checkbox on his list of things to complete and discard. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the papers in his face and tell him about the pregnancy test she'd taken that morning. 3 lines. Not 1, not 2, but 3 faint lines that the doctor had confirmed meant triplets. 3 babies growing inside her while their father sat across from her, eagerly destroying their family. She wanted to pull out the letter from the law firm that had arrived yesterday. The one that explained how her great-aunt Beatrice, a woman she'd met only twice at family reunions, had left her entire estate to Simone. $150 million. Real estate holdings across 5 states. Investment portfolios that would set her up for life. But she said nothing. She sat there in her worn Target dress, the one she'd bought on clearance because Brandon said they needed to save money, and she watched him end everything they'd built. Is there anything else? Brandon asked the lawyer, his voice tight with impatience. Through the glass wall of the conference room, Simone could see Natasha waiting in the lobby, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. 5 months along, according to the whispers at Brandon's office that had finally reached Simone's ears. No, Mr. Patterson. That concludes everything, the lawyer said, sliding the papers towards Simone. Mrs. Patterson, if you'll just sign here, here, and here. Simone picked up the pen. It felt heavy in her hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She thought about all the nights she'd waited up for Brandon, believing his excuses about working late. She thought about the anniversary he'd forgotten last month. She thought about how she'd been planning to surprise him with a romantic dinner tonight to try to fix whatever had broken between them. She signed her name. Simone Michelle Patterson, soon to be just Simone Michelle Grant again. There's the matter of asset division, the lawyer continued. The house is in Mr. Patterson's name, so Mrs. Patterson will need to vacate within 30 days. The car will remain with Mr. Patterson as well. Mrs. Patterson will receive nothing as there are no shared assets and she didn't work during the marriage. Simone had given up her teaching job when Brandon said he wanted a wife who could focus on building their home, maybe starting a family. She'd spent 3 years cooking his meals, cleaning their house, supporting his career while her own credentials gathered dust. That's fine, Simone said quietly. Let him think he'd won. Let him think he was leaving her with nothing. Brandon stood up quickly, already reaching for his phone. Natasha's waiting. We have a doctor's appointment. For his baby. The one he'd made with another woman while still married to her. Simone felt her stomach turn, though she didn't know if it was from morning sickness or disgust. Brandon, she said as he reached the door. He turned, and for just a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt maybe. Or doubt. But then it was gone. What? I hope you get everything you deserve. He frowned, probably trying to figure out if that was a blessing or a curse. Then he shrugged and walked out. Through the glass, Simone watched Natasha jump up and kiss him. They walked away together, his arm around her shoulders, her hand on her belly. The lawyer cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson. These situations are never easy. Simone gathered her purse and stood. Inside it, the letter from the law firm crinkled. In her pocket, the pregnancy test felt like it was burning through the fabric. Actually, she said, and for the first time that day she smiled. I think things are going to work out just fine. She walked out of that office with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small savings account with $2,000 she'd secretly saved from grocery money over the years. But she also walked out with 3 babies, $150 million, and a burning determination to build a life so incredible that Brandon would spend the rest of his days choking on his regret. The best revenge wasn't anger. It was success. And Simone was about to become very, very successful. Outside, the sun was shining. It was the first day of her new life and she was just getting started. She pulled out her phone and called the number from the inheritance letter. Hello, this is Simone Grant, she said, her voice steady and strong. I'm ready to discuss my aunt's estate. 3 months from now, Brandon would see her picture in the newspaper. 6 months from now, he'd realize what he'd lost. 1 year from now, he'd beg to come back. But Simone would be long gone, building an empire he could never touch. 3 weeks earlier, Simone had been happy. Or at least, she'd been trying to convince herself she was happy. The cracks in her marriage had been showing for months, but she'd been spackling over them with hope and denial, the way she did with the actual cracks in their rental house walls. It was a Tuesday when everything fell apart. Brandon had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered before work. Simone had been making his coffee, the fancy kind he liked that cost $12 a bag, when the screen lit up with a text message. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Our little one misses daddy." The message was from Nash, with a purple heart emoji. Simone's hands had started shaking so badly she'd almost dropped the phone. She'd known in that moment that her marriage was over. But knowing and accepting were two different things. So she'd done what any woman in denial would do. She'd started investigating. Brandon's laptop was easy to access. He used the same password for everything, their wedding date. The irony of that would have been funny if her heart wasn't shattering into a million pieces. The emails went back 6 months. 6 months of "I love you" messages to someone named Natasha. 6 months of hotel receipts and dinner reservations at restaurants he'd told Simone they couldn't afford. 6 months of lies while she'd been at home, eating ramen noodles and wondering why her husband didn't look at her the same way anymore. The pregnancy announcement was in an email from 3 weeks ago. Natasha was having a baby. Brandon's baby. They'd been talking about names. About getting a place together. About how he was going to handle the Simone situation. The Simone situation. That's what she'd been reduced to. A problem to be handled. She'd confronted him that night. He'd walked in from work with flowers, cheap ones from the grocery store, and she'd thrown the printed emails at his feet. Who is Natasha? He'd gone pale. Then red. Then he'd done something worse than denying it. He'd gotten angry at her. "You went through my phone? My computer? What's wrong with you, Simone? What's wrong with me? You're having a baby with another woman. Because you can't give me one," he'd shouted, and the words had hit her like a slap. "We've been trying for 3 years and nothing. The doctor said you're the problem, not me. Natasha got pregnant the first time we were together." Simone had felt like the room was spinning. They'd been trying for a baby. She'd been taking fertility supplements, tracking her ovulation, going to specialists. And he'd been creating a child with someone else the whole time. "So this is my fault?" she'd whispered. "I didn't mean it like that." But his face said he absolutely meant it like that. "Look, Natasha and we're in love. Real love. Not this obligatory married people thing we've got going on." "Obligatory? We're married, Brandon. We took vows." "Yeah, well, people make mistakes." He'd started pacing. "I want a divorce. Natasha's already 5 months along and I want to marry her before the baby comes. I want to do right by her. Do right by her. Not do right by his wife. Do right by the woman he'd been cheating with." "You're just going to throw away 7 years? 7 years of what, Simone? You don't even work. You stay home all day doing what exactly? The house is always a mess, dinner's late half the time, and you've let yourself go. When's the last time you even tried to look nice for me?" Each word was a knife. She'd quit her teaching job because he'd asked her to. She'd been depressed because their marriage was falling apart, because they couldn't have a baby, because she'd felt him pulling away and didn't know why. And he'd been with Natasha. "Get out," she'd said quietly. "What?" "Get out of this house right now. It's my house. My name is on the lease. You get out." And that's when she'd realized how trapped she was. No job. No money of her own except the secret savings. No car in her name. Nothing. He grabbed a bag and thrown some clothes in it. "My lawyer will contact you. Don't make this difficult, Simone. Just sign the papers and we can both move on." He'd left that night. Moved in with Natasha, she'd learned later. And for 3 weeks, Simone had lived in that house alone, crying, planning, trying to figure out how she was going to survive. She'd started applying for teaching positions. Her credentials were old but valid. She'd been updating her resume the morning the divorce papers arrived by courier. That same morning, she'd woken up feeling sick. She'd thrown up twice before noon. She'd been bloated, exhausted, emotional. She'd bought a pregnancy test at the dollar store, more out of habit than hope, because after 3 years of negative tests, she'd stopped believing it would ever happen. 3 lines. She'd stared at it for 20 minutes, then driven to the clinic. The nurse had done an ultrasound. "Congratulations, Mrs. Patterson. You're pregnant with triplets. About 6 weeks along. These 3 little beans right here. Triplets." After 3 years of nothing, her body had decided to give her 3 babies at once. The irony was devastating. Brandon had left her because she couldn't get pregnant, and now she was carrying 3 of his children. She'd driven home in a daze, the ultrasound pictures in her purse. She'd been sitting at the kitchen table trying to decide what to do when the mail arrived. The thick envelope from Whitmore and Associates law firm had been mixed in with the bills. She'd almost thrown it away thinking it was junk mail. But something made her open it. "Dear Ms. Grant, We regret to inform you of the passing of Mrs. Beatrice Grant. As the executor of her estate, we are contacting you regarding your inheritance. $150 million. Real estate. Investments. Her great-aunt, a woman she barely remembered, had left everything to her. The letter explained that Beatrice had never had children and Simone was her only living relative who'd shown her kindness at those family reunions years ago. Simone had sat there with a pregnancy test showing triplets in one hand and an inheritance letter in the other, and she'd started laughing. The kind of laughing that turns into crying that turns back into laughing. Brandon wanted to leave her with nothing. But life had just given her everything. She hadn't told him. Why would she? He'd made his choice. These babies were hers. This money was hers. Her future was hers. She'd met with the lawyer from the inheritance firm the next day, sworn them to secrecy and started making plans. By the time she sat in that divorce lawyer's office watching Brandon sign away his rights to her, she'd already transferred the inheritance into secret accounts, already had movers scheduled to take her belongings to storage, already had a one-way ticket to Atlanta booked for the day after the divorce was final. Brandon thought he was leaving her broken. He had no idea he'd just set her free. The plane tickets to Atlanta were for Friday morning. The divorce had been finalized on Tuesday. That gave Simone 3 days to pack up the life she was leaving behind and prepare for the one waiting ahead. She'd rented a furnished apartment in Atlanta sight unseen. Nothing fancy, just a clean 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood where she could figure out her next steps. The inheritance was real, sitting in accounts that only she could access, but it still felt like a dream. Like she might wake up and find herself back in that cold lawyer's office, signing away her future. On Wednesday morning she woke up and threw up. Morning sickness. The doctor had said it might get worse with triplets. 3 babies. 3 little lives depending on her. The weight of it should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like purpose. She called the number for Whitmore and Associates. "Miss Grant, how lovely to hear from you," the lawyer, Mr. Whitmore, said. He was an older man with a kind voice. "Have you had time to review the estate documents?" "I have. I want to accept the inheritance." "Excellent. Now there are several properties you'll need to inspect. Your aunt owned apartment buildings in New York, Chicago, and Miami, as well as commercial real estate in Los Angeles and Houston. The investment portfolio is quite diverse. I'd suggest meeting with a financial advisor too." "Mr. Whitmore," Simone interrupted. "I need to ask you something. Is there any way my ex-husband could find out about this inheritance?" There was a pause. "Your aunt left everything to you specifically, Ms. Grant. Your married name isn't anywhere in the documentation. The inheritance came to Simone Michelle Grant. If you don't tell him, there's no public record he could access. Attorney-client privilege protects our communications." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. May I ask why the secrecy?" "Because he doesn't deserve to know. And I don't want him coming back for the money." "I understand completely. Many of our clients prefer discretion. Now, shall we discuss how you'd like to proceed with managing the estate?" They talked for 2 hours. Simone learned that her great-aunt Beatrice had been a sharp businesswoman who'd started buying properties in the 1960s when nobody else wanted them, then watched their value skyrocket. The woman had been brilliant, turning a small inheritance of her own into a massive fortune. "Your aunt left a letter for you," Mr. Whitmore said toward the end of their call. "Would you like me to read it?" "Yes, please." She heard papers rustling. Then Mr. Whitmore's voice reading her aunt's words. "Dear Simone, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably confused about why I left you everything. The truth is, I remember you from those family reunions. You were the only one who talked to me like I was a person instead of a bank account. You asked about my life, my stories. You were kind when you didn't have to be. I never had children of my own, and I built this fortune with nobody to share it with. I want you to have it. Not because of obligation, but because I saw something in you. Strength, intelligence, heart. Use this money to build the life you deserve. Don't let anyone make you small. You're destined for greatness. With love, Aunt Beatrice." Simone was crying by the end. She'd been kind to an old woman at a family barbecue when she was 14, and that single act of decency had just changed her entire life. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your aunt was an extraordinary woman," Mr. Whitmore said gently. "I believe you will be too." After they hung up, Simone sat on the floor of the empty living room. Brandon had taken most of the furniture. His name had been on the lease on everything. He'd left her the old couch, the kitchen table with the wobbly leg, and the bed that was probably older than their marriage. She didn't care. She didn't want anything from this life. She pulled out the ultrasound pictures. 3 little blobs that would become 3 little people. 2 girls and a boy, the technician thought, though it was too early to be certain. We're going to be okay, she told them. Better than okay. We're going to be amazing. That night she couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing with possibilities. What should she do with the inheritance? She didn't want to be one of those lottery winners who went broke in 5 years. She wanted to build something lasting. Something meaningful. She thought about her teaching career, the one she'd abandoned. She'd loved working with children, seeing their faces light up when they finally understood something new. She'd been good at it too. Parent-teacher conferences had always been full of praise. An idea started forming. Childcare. Quality, affordable childcare. She'd seen so many parents struggling to find good care for their kids, places that were safe and educational but didn't cost a fortune. What if she could create that? A chain of centers that paid teachers well, kept costs reasonable for families, and provided excellent care. She could use her inheritance to start a business that actually helped people. She could build something real, something that would support her children and others. By Thursday morning she had filled 3 notebooks with ideas. She'd researched childcare licensing requirements, business formation, real estate acquisition. She'd found a lawyer in Atlanta who specialized in business startups. She'd scheduled meetings with financial advisors and accountants. Brandon's text came at noon. Hey, I need to grab some more stuff from the house tomorrow morning. Will you be there? She deleted it without responding. She'd be on a plane to Atlanta by then. He could come by and take whatever he wanted from the empty house. She was taking everything that mattered. Friday morning she woke up at 4 a.m. The movers had come Thursday and taken her few belongings to storage. The apartment was empty except for her suitcase and the ultrasound pictures she'd taped to the bathroom mirror as a reminder of why she was doing this. She took one last look at the bathroom mirror, at those 3 little blobs who would become her children, and she smiled. Let's go build an empire, babies. The Uber to the airport arrived at 5. By 6 she was through security. By 7 she was on a plane to Atlanta first class because she could afford it now. As the plane took off, she looked down at the city disappearing below her. Somewhere down there, Brandon was probably waking up next to Natasha, planning their life together, thinking he'd made the right choice. He had no idea that the woman he'd thrown away like garbage was about to become more successful than he could ever imagine. And when he finally found out, when he saw what she'd built, when he realized what he'd lost, it would be too late. Simone Grant was done being small. Done being invisible. Done being someone's mistake. She was about to become unstoppable. Atlanta greeted Simone with humidity and hope. She'd chosen the city deliberately. It was far enough from her old life that she wouldn't run into anyone she knew, but close enough that she could still access major markets and opportunities. Plus, the cost of living was reasonable compared to places like New York or Los Angeles, which meant her money would stretch further while she built her business. The apartment she'd rented was in Midtown, a neighborhood full of young professionals and families. It wasn't luxurious, just a clean 2-bedroom with decent light and a small balcony. She'd have plenty of time to find something permanent later. Right now, she needed simplicity while she figured out her next steps. Her first appointment was with Dr. Helen Rodriguez, the obstetrician who'd come highly recommended by the relocation service Simone had hired. The office was bright and modern, with magazines that weren't 5 years old and a fish tank that actually had fish in it. Miss Grant, Dr. Rodriguez said, shaking her hand warmly. Congratulations on the triplets. That's quite an adventure you're starting. Thank you. I'm still getting used to the idea. The examination confirmed everything. 3 healthy babies about 8 weeks along. Due date in late March. You'll need to be careful, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Multiple births carry more risks. More doctor visits, more monitoring. You'll probably be on bed rest toward the end. Do you have family here to help? No. It's just me. Dr. Rodriguez gave her a knowing look. I see this more often than you'd think. Strong women building lives on their own terms. You'll be fine, but let's make sure you have a support system in place. I can recommend some services. Nanny agencies, meal delivery, postpartum doulas. Simone appreciated that the doctor didn't pry or judge. She just offered solutions. I'd like that. Thank you. Her next stop was the law office of Patricia Chin. Wait, Chin was on the ban list. Let me change that. Her next stop was the law office of Patricia Morrison, a business attorney who'd built her practice helping women entrepreneurs. Patricia was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that Simone immediately respected. Tell me what you're thinking, Patricia said once they'd settled in her office. Simone laid out her plan. A chain of childcare centers that would pay teachers competitive wages, provide excellent care, and remain affordable for working families. She'd use her inheritance to fund the first few locations, then expand as revenue grew. It's ambitious, Patricia said, but it's also smart. The childcare industry is underserved and overpriced. If you can figure out the model, you could fill a real need. I think I can. I've been doing research. If I own the buildings instead of leasing, that cuts overhead significantly. If I hire well and pay well, I'll retain good teachers and build a reputation. If I keep the parent-to-teacher ratios low, I can charge a bit more than budget places but still be cheaper than the luxury centers. Patricia was nodding. You've done your homework. Have you thought about the business structure? LLC for liability protection, but I'm open to suggestions. They spent 3 hours going over details. Business formation, licensing requirements, insurance, employment law, contracts. Patricia explained everything clearly, never talking down to her, always treating her like the intelligent woman she was. One more thing, Patricia said at the end. Your inheritance. I assume you want to protect it? Absolutely. My ex-husband has no idea it exists and I want to keep it that way. Smart. We'll set up trusts for your children, separate accounts for business and personal expenses, and make sure everything is ironclad. If he ever comes sniffing around, he won't find anything. Simone felt the tension she'd been carrying in her shoulders release. She'd made the right choice coming to Atlanta. She'd found the right people to help her. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. She formed her company, Little Scholars Educational Centers LLC. She hired an accountant recommended by Patricia. She met with real estate agents to scout locations for her first center. She also started building her team. She found a business manager named Rachel who'd worked in childcare administration for 15 years and was excited about Simone's vision. She hired a marketing consultant to help build the brand. She connected with an architect who specialized in educational facilities. The morning sickness was getting worse, but Simone pushed through. She kept crackers in her purse and learned to schedule important meetings for late afternoon when she felt less queasy. By week 3 in Atlanta, she'd made an offer on a building in a growing neighborhood. It was a former community center that had been sitting empty for 2 years. The owners were motivated to sell, and Simone got it for a reasonable price. With renovations, it would be perfect for her first location. She stood in the empty building with Rachel and the architect, watching them discuss classroom layouts and playground designs, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Purpose. Power. This is going to be amazing, Rachel said, her eyes bright with excitement. I can already picture it full of kids. Me too, Simone said, one hand resting on her belly where 3 of those kids were growing. That night, she sat on her apartment balcony with a notebook, planning. She'd need to hire teachers, buy equipment, market the center, handle licensing inspections. There was so much to do before the doors could open, and she wanted at least one location running before the babies arrived. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she'd thought she'd deleted but apparently hadn't. Brandon, I stopped by the house. You're gone? Where are you? She stared at the message for a long moment. Part of her wanted to ignore it completely. But another part of her, the petty part, wanted him to know she was fine. Better than fine. Simone, I moved. Don't contact me again. Brandon, we were married for 7 years. You can't just disappear. Simone, you divorced me. You chose someone else. I'm moving on with my life. Brandon, come on, don't be dramatic. We can still be friends. She actually laughed out loud at that. Friends. The man who'd told her she was a failure, who'd abandoned her for his pregnant mistress, who'd taken everything and left her with nothing, wanted to be friends. Simone, I have nothing to say to you. Lose my number. She blocked him. She should have done it sooner, but she'd needed to see those messages. Needed to remember why she was doing this. He thought she was dramatic. He thought she was being petty. He had no idea she was building an empire. Over the next month, things accelerated. The building renovation started. Simone hired her first 4 teachers, all experienced women who were excited about the pay and benefits she was offering. She ordered furniture and equipment. She worked with a graphic designer on a logo and website. At her 12-week ultrasound, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed the genders. 2 girls and a boy, just like they'd thought. Have you thought about names? The doctor asked. Simone had. 3 names that meant something to her. Faith, hope, and justice. Because that's what this new life was about. Having faith in herself, hope for the future, and justice for the way she'd been treated. Faith, hope, and justice, she said out loud for the first time. Those are beautiful, Dr. Rodriguez said. Strong names for strong babies. Simone looked at the ultrasound screen, at 3 little forms that were becoming more human-looking every week. She'd been terrified at first, wondering how she'd handle 3 babies alone. But now she realized she wasn't alone. She had her team, her doctors, her plans. She had herself. And she was more than enough. 2 years had passed since Simone signed those divorce papers, and the woman who'd walked out of that lawyer's office broken and empty-handed would barely recognize the woman she'd become. The first Little Scholars Educational Center had opened when the triplets were 3 months old. Simone had worked until the day before her emergency C-section at 34 weeks, delegating from her hospital bed, conducting interviews via video call while recovering. Rachel had called her crazy. The doctors had called her determined. Simone called it survival. Faith, hope, and justice had been tiny but healthy, spending only 2 weeks in the NICU before coming home. Simone had hired a night nurse for the first 6 months because sleep was impossible with 3 infants, but she'd refused to let new motherhood stop her momentum. While the babies napped, she worked. While the nurse handled night feedings, she planned. While other new mothers were lost in the fog of exhaustion, Simone was building. The first center had been an immediate success. Parents were desperate for quality care they could afford, and word spread fast. Within 6 months there was a waiting list. Within a year, Simone was scouting locations for a second center. Now, 2 years later, Little Scholars had 5 locations across Atlanta and plans for 3 more. Simone had bought the buildings for each center instead of leasing, using her inheritance strategically. The real estate alone was appreciating faster than she'd projected. But childcare was just the beginning. She'd taken a portion of the inheritance and started a real estate investment company, focusing on mixed-use developments in growing neighborhoods. Buy the land, develop it smart, create community spaces that brought value to the area. It was working. Her net worth had grown beyond the initial inheritance. Forbes had noticed. The email came on a Tuesday morning. Simone was in her office, a converted loft space in a building she owned in downtown Atlanta. The triplets were in the childcare center downstairs. She could literally see them on the security monitors, playing in the toddler room with their teachers. "Ms. Grant, we're writing a feature on young entrepreneurs who are changing their industries. We'd like to include you in our 30 under 30 impact list. Would you be available for an interview?" She read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Forbes. They wanted to interview her. Rachel burst into her office 5 minutes later. "Did you see the email?" Forbes. "Simone, this is huge." "I know. I'm still processing." "You have to do it. This could take the business national. Imagine Little Scholars in every major city. Imagine the doors this opens." Simone thought about Brandon wherever he was, reading Forbes and seeing her face. The satisfaction was almost too sweet to bear. "Set up the interview," she said. The Forbes writer was a woman named Jennifer who met Simone at one of the Little Scholars centers. She watched Simone interact with the children, interview a prospective teacher, handle a parent concern, and review financial reports, all before lunch. "You're juggling a lot," Jennifer observed. "I'm building something that matters," Simone replied. Quality childcare changes everything for families. When parents know their children are safe, learning, and happy, they can focus on their careers. When teachers are paid well and respected, they stay and build relationships with the kids. It's not complicated, it's just about doing things right. "And you're doing this as a single mother of triplets?" "The triplets are my motivation. I want them to grow up seeing their mother build something meaningful. I want them to know that setbacks don't define you. How you respond to them does." Jennifer's article came out 3 weeks later. The headline read, "From Divorce to Empire, How Simone Grant Built a Childcare Revolution." The article detailed Little Scholars' expansion, Simone's business philosophy, and her real estate ventures. It mentioned her triplets and her commitment to work-life balance. It did not mention Brandon because Simone had refused to discuss him. He didn't deserve space in her success story. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Her website crashed from traffic. The phone didn't stop ringing. Investment firms wanted to talk about franchising opportunities. Cities across the country reached out about bringing Little Scholars to their communities. Simone's lawyer called. "Simone, you need to prepare for something. This kind of publicity, your ex-husband is going to see this. He's going to know about the money now." "Let him know," Simone said calmly. "There's nothing he can do about it. The divorce is final. The businesses are in my name. He has no claim to anything I've built." But she knew it was coming. The moment when Brandon would realize what he'd walked away from. It happened 2 days later. He called from a number she didn't recognize. "Simone? It's Brandon." She almost hung up. Should have hung up. But curiosity won. "What do you want?" I saw the Forbes article. Simone, congratulations. Really. You've done amazing things. His voice was different, smaller somehow. The arrogance was gone. Thank you. Was there something else? The article mentioned triplets. You have kids. Here it was. The moment she'd been both dreading and anticipating. Yes, 2-year-olds. 2 girls and a boy. A long pause. She could almost hear his brain working, doing the math. Simone, are they mine? Does it matter? Of course it matters. If you were pregnant when we divorced. When you divorced me, she corrected. You filed. You left. You chose someone else. Remember? I didn't know you were pregnant. You didn't ask. You didn't care. You were too busy with Natasha. Another pause. Can we meet? Talk about this? No. Simone, if those are my kids. My kids, she said firmly. I carried them alone. I delivered them alone. I've raised them alone. You have no part in this. I have rights. You have nothing. You signed away your rights when you walked out. Goodbye, Brandon. She hung up and blocked the number. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger. The audacity of him, calling after 2 years after seeing her success in Forbes, suddenly interested in being a father. Rachel appeared in the doorway. You okay? I heard you on the phone. Brandon saw the article. He knows about the kids now. What did he say? What they always say. That he has rights, that we should talk. As if 2 years of absence can be erased with a phone call. What are you going to do? Simone looked at the security monitor where Faith, Hope, and Justice were having snack time. They were perfect. Happy, healthy, thriving. They didn't need Brandon. They never had. Nothing, Simone said. I'm going to do nothing. He's not part of our lives and he never will be. What if he tries to push for custody or visitation? Let him try. I have the best lawyers money can buy. And I have documentation of 2 years of him knowing I existed and choosing not to reach out. 2 years of zero support, zero interest. No judge will give him access to children he abandoned. Rachel nodded. You're right. But still be prepared. Men like that don't give up easily when they realize what they've lost. Simone knew she was right. This wasn't over. Brandon had seen her success and suddenly wanted back in. But she'd built her life without him and she'd continue building it without him. He'd made his choice 2 years ago in that lawyer's office. Now he'd have to live with it. The Forbes article changed everything. Within 3 months, Simone went from successful businesswoman to public figure. Her inbox was flooded with speaking requests, partnership opportunities, and media interviews. Little scholars had waiting lists at every location, and she'd fast-tracked plans for expansion into Charlotte, Nashville, and Birmingham. But success came with visibility, and visibility brought complications. Simone was in New York for a business conference when her phone exploded with notifications. Someone had posted a photo of her on social media with the caption, "From welfare to Forbes in 2 years. This is what determination looks like." The post had gone viral, shared hundreds of thousands of times. Except she'd never been on welfare. The post was completely false. But it didn't matter. The story was inspiring and people wanted to believe it. Within hours, news outlets were calling her a rags to riches story without bothering to check facts. She had to release a statement clarifying her actual background. Yes, she'd struggled after her divorce. Yes, she'd rebuilt from nothing. But she'd had an inheritance that gave her seed capital. She wanted to be honest about the help she'd received. You shouldn't have said anything about the inheritance, her publicist told her. People love a underdog story. I'm not going to lie, Simone replied. My story is inspiring enough without making things up. I was left with nothing by my ex-husband and I built something anyway. That's the truth. The honesty resonated. Women reached out thanking her for being real about having help and resources. Single mothers said they felt seen. Her authenticity became part of her brand. The speaking requests increased. Simone found herself on stages at conferences, giving keynote speeches about entrepreneurship, single motherhood, and building businesses with purpose. She was good at it, natural and comfortable in front of crowds. At a conference in Chicago, a woman approached her after her speech. Miss Grant, I just wanted to say thank you. Your story gave me courage to leave my unhappy marriage. I'm starting over at 45 and if you can do it, so can I. These moments made all the stress worthwhile. Simone was becoming more than a businesswoman. She was becoming a symbol of resilience. But with increased visibility came increased scrutiny. A gossip blog published a hit piece titled, "The Real Simone Grant, Not So Perfect After All." It detailed her divorce, found photos of her and Brandon from social media, and implied that she'd somehow trapped him or driven him away. The article quoted an anonymous source close to the situation, saying that Simone had been difficult to live with, and that Brandon had no choice but to find happiness elsewhere. The source was clearly Natasha. Simone's first instinct was to respond, to defend herself, to set the record straight. But Patricia Morrison, her lawyer, advised against it. "Don't engage," Patricia said. "You're successful now, which means people will try to tear you down. Responding gives the story oxygen. Your life speaks for itself." So Simone stayed quiet, and within a week the story died. Her supporters drowned out the negativity, sharing their own stories of divorce and resilience. The hit piece actually ended up making her more sympathetic. Meanwhile, Brandon's life was unraveling spectacularly, though Simone only learned this through a message from her old neighbor, Gloria, who'd found her through Little Scholar's website. "I thought you should know," Gloria wrote. "Brandon and Natasha are having problems. Big ones. I've seen them fighting in the driveway. The baby cries all the time. He looks miserable." Simone felt nothing about this information. No satisfaction, no sympathy. Just emptiness where Brandon used to occupy space in her mind. She didn't respond to Gloria. She didn't need updates on Brandon's life. She had her own life to live. That life was getting busier by the day. Little Scholars was opening its 6th location. Her real estate company had just closed on a major development deal. And the Triplets were becoming little people with personalities and opinions. Faith was quiet and thoughtful, always watching everything carefully before making a move. Hope was fearless and adventurous, climbing everything in sight. Justice was the peacemaker, already comforting other children when they cried at daycare. Simone documented nothing publicly. After the viral post incident, she'd made her social media private and rarely posted photos of the kids. Their privacy was sacred. They hadn't asked to be part of her public story, so she kept them separate from it. On the triplets' 2nd birthday, Simone threw a party at the park. Just close friends, Rachel and her family, some teachers from Little Scholars, Dr. Rodriguez and her wife. It was simple and perfect. 3 small cakes, balloons, presents, and laughter. As she watched Faith, Hope, and Justice run around the playground, their joy uncomplicated and pure, Simone felt complete. This was what she'd built. Not just businesses and bank accounts, but a real life. A happy life. A life that Brandon had no part in and never would. Her phone rang. A New York number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Simone Grant? This is Catherine Wells from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on the show to discuss your business journey and your thoughts on working motherhood. Would you be interested?" Good Morning America. National television. Millions of viewers. "Yes," Simone said, watching her children play. "Yes, I'd be interested." Because this was her life now. Her face on magazine covers, her voice on national television, her story inspiring others. And somewhere out there, Brandon would see it all and choke on his regret. That wasn't why she was doing this. She was building her empire for herself and her children. But his regret would be a nice bonus. The interview was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Simone prepared carefully, working with her publicist on message points. She wanted to talk about accessible childcare, about single mothers in business, about building wealth with purpose. The night before she flew to New York for the interview, she put the triplets to bed and stood in their doorway watching them sleep. 3 beautiful children who'd never know their father. 3 reasons she got up every morning and fought to be better, do better, build better. "Thank you for leaving, Brandon," she whispered into the darkness. "You set me free." And she meant it. His rejection had been the best thing that ever happened to her. Brandon Patterson stared at the television screen in disbelief. There was Simone, his ex-wife, sitting on the Good Morning America couch, looking polished and confident in a navy suit, laughing at something the host said. "And these are your triplets?" the host asked, gesturing to a photo on the screen. 3 toddlers, 2 girls and a boy, grinning at the camera. "Yes, Faith, Hope, and Justice. They're my motivation for everything." Single motherhood while building a business empire. How do you manage it all? "You just do," Simone said with a smile. "You figure it out because you have to. My children need to eat, they need stability, they need a mother who shows them that hard work and determination matter. So you make it work." Brandon felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Triplets. She'd been pregnant with triplets when he left her, and he'd had no idea. "Turn it off," Natasha snapped from the kitchen. "I'm sick of seeing her face everywhere." Brandon ignored her, watching as Simone discussed her business strategy, her expansion plans, her commitment to affordable childcare. She was articulate and warm, nothing like the broken woman he'd left in that lawyer's office 2 years ago. The article said she inherited $150 million, the host was saying. Did you know about that windfall before you started the business? I found out the day after my divorce was finalized, Simone said. It was unexpected and honestly perfect timing. But money alone doesn't build successful businesses. You need vision, hard work, and a commitment to doing things right. The inheritance gave me seed capital, but everything since then has been earned. Brandon did the math in his head. The day after the divorce, she'd known about the money and hadn't said a word. She'd let him walk away thinking she had nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Is this true? Are those your children? Why didn't you tell me I have grandchildren? Then his brother. Dude, did you know Simone was pregnant? Did you seriously divorce her while she was carrying triplets? Then his old college roommate. Man, you really messed up. The messages kept coming. Everyone he knew had apparently seen the interview or the Forbes article or one of the dozens of other features about Simone's success. And they all wanted to know the same thing. How had he been stupid enough to leave her? Your son is crying again, Natasha said, appearing in the doorway with their 2-year-old Tyler on her hip. The boy's face was red and streaked with tears. He'd been sick for a week with an ear infection, and nobody in the house was getting any sleep. I'll take him, Brandon said, reaching for Tyler. The boy reached back and Brandon felt the familiar weight of fatherhood, except it felt heavier today. Because now he knew there were 3 other children out there, his children who he'd never held. We need to talk about money, Natasha said. The credit card bill came. We're maxed out again. Money. It was all they ever talked about anymore. Brandon was still working the same corporate job, making decent money but nowhere near enough to support Natasha's spending habits. She'd quit working when Tyler was born, saying she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but that meant everything fell on Brandon's salary. I got a raise last month, he said tiredly. It's not enough. Look at Simone. She's a millionaire. Your ex-wife is richer than we'll ever be, and you let her go. I didn't know about the money. But you knew she was smart, capable, a hard worker. And you still chose me. Natasha's voice was bitter. She'd been bitter for months now, ever since the Forbes article came out. Do you regret it? Choosing me? Brandon looked at Tyler, then at Natasha. 2 years ago, she'd been exciting, new, different from Simone. She'd made him feel desired and alive. Now she was just another person needing things from him. Of course not, he lied. But the truth was he regretted it every single day. Not because of the money, though that stung. But because he'd thrown away 7 years with a woman who genuinely loved him for a fantasy that had soured the moment it became reality. Natasha had been fun when she was the other woman. When their relationship was stolen moments in hotel rooms and the thrill of something forbidden. But marriage and a colicky baby and bills and reality had stripped away all the excitement. Now she was just demanding and resentful, angry that their life wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. I'm going to reach out to her, Brandon said suddenly. What? Why? Those are my children, Natasha. I have a right to know them. After 2 years? You think she's going to welcome you with open arms? She told Forbes you weren't in the picture. She's made it clear she doesn't want you around. She was probably just protecting their privacy. But legally, I'm their father. I have rights. Natasha laughed, harsh and sharp. Rights? You abandoned her while she was pregnant. You didn't even know she was pregnant. Good luck explaining that to a judge. But Brandon was already looking up family lawyers, already planning what he'd say to Simone. He had to try. He couldn't just let 3 of his children grow up without knowing their father. The next day he called the number for Little Scholars that was listed on the website. A receptionist answered. Little Scholars Educational Centers, how may I help you? I need to speak with Simone Grant. It's urgent. Ms. Grant doesn't take unsolicited calls. If you'd like to schedule a tour or discuss enrollment, I can transfer you to our admissions team. This is personal. I'm her ex-husband. Pause. Please hold. 5 minutes passed. Then a different voice, older and firmer. This is Rachel Thompson, Ms. Grant's business manager. Ms. Grant has made it clear she doesn't wish to speak with you, Mr. Patterson. I just want to discuss my children. The children you didn't know existed until you saw them on television? The children you've made no effort to contact or support for 2 years. I didn't know she was pregnant. And whose fault is that? You divorced her while she was 8 weeks along. You could have reached out at any point to check on her welfare. You chose not to. I want to meet them. Be part of their lives. That's not your decision to make. Ms. Grant is the sole legal guardian. You have no rights here. I'm their biological father. I have legal rights. Then I suggest you contact a lawyer, Mr. Patterson. But I'll warn you now, Ms. Grant has excellent legal representation, and any attempt to insert yourself into those children's lives will be met with fierce resistance. Have a good day. She hung up. Brandon sat in his car outside his office building, shaking with frustration and rage and something else he didn't want to name. Grief maybe. For the life he could have had, the children he'd never known, the woman he'd thrown away. He did call a lawyer. A family attorney who listened to his story and then delivered the bad news. Mr. Patterson, I'll be honest with you. You have an uphill battle here. You didn't just leave your wife. You left her while she was pregnant, even if you didn't know it. You made no effort to contact her for 2 years. You paid no child support. You showed no interest in her well-being. From a legal standpoint, you're a stranger to those children. But I'm their father. Biology doesn't automatically grant you rights, especially not when you've demonstrated no interest in exercising those rights. Miss Grant would argue that you abandoned them, and she'd be right. Any judge would see it that way. So what do I do? The lawyer sighed. You can file for a paternity test and try to establish parental rights, but it's going to be expensive, time-consuming, and honestly likely unsuccessful. Ms. Grant can demonstrate 2 years of sole care and support. She can show that the children have never known you and that introducing you now would be disruptive. Most judges would rule in her favor. Brandon drove home in a daze. Tyler was crying when he walked in. Natasha was on the phone, arguing with someone about a credit card payment. The apartment was a mess. His life was a mess. And somewhere in Atlanta, Simone was living in a mansion with 3 healthy children, running a business empire, being interviewed on national television about her success. He'd made the biggest mistake of his life, and there was no way to fix it. The letter arrived via courier on a Wednesday morning. Simone was in a meeting with her expansion team when her assistant interrupted. Sorry to bother you, but a legal document just arrived that requires immediate attention. Simone excused herself and opened the envelope in her office. Petition for paternity and parental rights, filed by Brandon Matthew Patterson. She'd been expecting this. Ever since the Good Morning America interview 3 weeks ago, she'd known Brandon would make a move. Men like him always did once they realized what they'd lost. She called Patricia Morrison immediately. I got it too, Patricia said. He's filing for paternity testing and requesting custody arrangements. Can he do this? He can file, but winning is another matter. We have a strong case. Want to come by this afternoon and discuss strategy? At Patricia's office, Simone read through Brandon's petition. He claimed he'd been denied knowledge of the children's existence. He argued that he had a right to establish a relationship with his biological children. He requested joint custody and visitation rights. This is garbage, Simone said. He knew where I was. He could have checked on me at any time. That's exactly what we'll argue. He made no effort to contact you for 2 years. He paid no support. He showed no interest in your well-being. The moment he saw you were successful, suddenly he wants to be a father. What are our chances? Excellent. Georgia courts prioritize the best interest of the child. 3 2-year-olds who've never met this man, who have a stable, loving home with their mother, who are thriving in every way. No judge is going to disrupt that for a man who abandoned them. But he wants a paternity test. Let him have it. It'll prove he's the biological father, but biology doesn't equal parenthood. Parenthood is about showing up, providing support, being present. He's done none of those things. Still, the petition rattled Simone. She built a perfect life for her children, and Brandon was trying to crash into it like a wrecking ball. The paternity test was scheduled for the following week. Simone had to bring the triplets to a clinic, which she hated. She didn't want them involved in this mess, but the court required it. Faith, Hope, and Justice were confused by the cheek swabs, asking why the doctor needed to look in their mouths. Simone explained it as simply as possible, hating every second of it. The results came back in 3 days. Brandon was confirmed as the biological father. His lawyer immediately filed for a hearing to establish custody arrangements. He's pushing hard, Patricia said. Which means he's either serious about this or he's trying to leverage something. Leverage what? Money. Some fathers file for custody knowing they'll lose, but hoping the mother will offer a settlement to make them go away. Has he contacted you directly? No. Not since the phone call months ago. But that changed the next day. Brandon showed up at Little Scholar's main office. Simone was in a meeting when her assistant buzzed. There's a man here who says he's your ex-husband. Security is with him. Should I call the police? No. Tell security to escort him to conference room B. I'll be there in 5 minutes. She finished her meeting, composed herself, and walked to the conference room. Brandon was sitting at the table, looking around at the modern space with something like awe on his face. He'd aged in 2 years. There were lines around his eyes, gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. Simone, he said, standing. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. I saw the interview. The Forbes article. Everything you've built. It's incredible. For minutes. He sat back down, running his hands through his hair. I messed up. I know I did. Walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. 3 minutes. Can you please just talk to me like a human being? We were married for 7 years. That has to count for something. It counted for nothing when you left me for your mistress. 2 minutes. I didn't know you were pregnant. You didn't ask. You didn't care. You told me I was the problem, that I couldn't give you children, and then you walked away. The fact that I was pregnant is irrelevant. You made your choice. I want to know my children. Your children? Simone's voice was ice. Those are my children. Mine. I carried them while you were playing house with Natasha. I delivered them alone. I've raised them alone. You're a sperm donor, Brandon. Nothing more. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about how you left me with nothing. No job, no car, no home. Let's talk about how you told me I was worthless. Let's talk about how you flaunted your pregnant mistress in my face. Where's the fairness in that? Brandon looked at the table. I was wrong. I know that now. But those children deserve to know their father. Those children deserve stability, love, and protection from people who would hurt them. You fall into that last category. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want a chance. You had a chance. 7 years of chances. You threw them all away. Simone stood. Your 5 minutes are up. My lawyer will see you in court. Simone, wait. Can we please just talk about this reasonably? There's nothing to discuss. You're not going to be part of their lives. I don't care what the court says. Even if they grant you supervised visitation, which they won't, I'll appeal. I'll fight you every step of the way. You will never have access to my children. You can't keep them from me forever. Watch me. She walked to the door and opened it. Security was waiting outside. Please escort Mr. Patterson from the building. He's not welcome here. Brandon stood slowly. I'm not giving up. Neither am I. And I have better lawyers. She watched him leave, then returned to her office and closed the door. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger. The absolute nerve of him showing up at her workplace, asking for chances he didn't deserve. Rachel knocked and entered. You okay? I'm fine. Furious but fine. What did he want? What they always want. To suddenly be a father now that it's convenient. He'll lose in court. I know. But I hate that we have to go through it at all. I hate that my children's names are on legal documents because their biological father is too selfish to stay away. But they'll be okay. They have you. That was true. Faith, hope, and justice had everything they needed. They lived in a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood. They attended the best childcare center in Atlanta, the one their mother had built specifically to give children opportunities. They had trust funds that would ensure their futures. They had a mother who loved them fiercely and would protect them from anything, including their own father. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. In that time, Simone doubled down on documenting everything. Photos of the triplets thriving, reports from their teachers about their development, medical records showing their excellent health, financial statements proving she could provide for them indefinitely. Patricia compiled everything into a presentation that was damning for Brandon. 2 years of absence. 0 financial support. No birthday cards, no phone calls, no attempts at contact until he saw Simone's success on television. He doesn't have a leg to stand on, Patricia said. But be prepared for him to try every emotional manipulation in the book. Simone was prepared. She'd already survived Brandon's betrayal once. She could survive his attempted comeback. What he didn't understand was that she wasn't the same woman he'd left in that lawyer's office. That woman had been broken, unsure, dependent. The woman standing in her place was a force of nature, and she was done being anyone's second choice. The courtroom was smaller than Simone expected. She'd imagined something grand and imposing, but it was just a regular room with wood paneling and uncomfortable chairs. Brandon sat across the aisle with his lawyer, a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit. Brandon looked nervous, fidgeting with his tie. Simone sat with Patricia, calm and composed in a gray suit. She'd left the triplets with Rachel and a team of caregivers. There was no way she'd bring them to this circus. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Whitfield, reviewed the documents before her. She'd already read both sides' submissions. Now came the hearing where Brandon would try to convince her he deserved parental rights. "Mr. Patterson," Judge Whitfield said, "you're petitioning for custody and visitation rights to 3 children who are now 2.5 years old. Children you've never met. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brandon said, standing. "I didn't know they existed until I saw their mother on television. Had I known, I would have been involved from the beginning." "Miss Grant," the judge turned to Simone. "Is it true that you never informed Mr. Patterson of the pregnancy?" Simone stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. I discovered I was pregnant the day after our divorce was finalized. At that point, Mr. Patterson had already made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. He'd left me for another woman who was pregnant with his child. I saw no reason to involve him in my life or my children's lives." "But they're his biological children," Brandon's lawyer interjected. "He has a right." "Let me stop you there," Judge Whitfield said. "Biology doesn't automatically confer rights, counselor. This court is interested in the best interests of the children, not the desires of adults who suddenly decide they want to be parents." She looked at Brandon. "Mr. Patterson, you had 2 years to reach out to your ex-wife. 2 years to check on her well-being. 2 years to demonstrate any interest in her life. According to the testimony, you made 1 phone call after the divorce and then no contact until you saw her on national television. Is that accurate?" Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "I thought she'd moved on. I didn't want to disrupt her life." "But you want to disrupt it now?" "I want to know my children. The children you abandoned before they were born? Help me understand your reasoning, Mr. Patterson." Brandon's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client didn't abandon anyone. He wasn't aware of the pregnancy. He's here now, ready to take responsibility. Ready to take responsibility after seeing that Ms. Grant is a successful millionaire," Patricia said, standing. "Not when she needed support during her pregnancy. Not during the births, which were complicated and required an emergency C-section. Not during the sleepless nights of caring for 3 infants alone. Only now, when it's convenient and potentially financially advantageous." "I'm not after her money," Brandon protested. "Then what are you after?" Judge Whitfield asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, you had multiple opportunities to be a father and you chose not to take them. Ms. Grant sent you a message after the divorce informing you of her new phone number and city. You could have responded. You didn't." "I didn't get any message," Brandon said. Patricia pulled out a document. Text message records show a message was delivered to Mr. Patterson's phone 3 days after the divorce. He read it but never responded. Brandon's face went red. Simone remembered sending that text. It had been brief. "I've moved to Atlanta. This is my new number if you need to reach me for any legal purposes." She'd sent it to cover herself legally, to prove she'd made contact available. She'd never expected a response and she hadn't gotten one. Judge Whitfield reviewed the phone records. "So you did receive notification of how to contact Ms. Grant, and you chose not to." "I didn't think it was important," Brandon mumbled. "You didn't think your ex-wife's contact information was important. But now you think being a father is important. Interesting timing." The judge reviewed more documents. Simone's financial records showing she'd paid for everything. Medical records showing the triplets' excellent health. Statements from their teachers about their development. Character references from business associates, friends, and Dr. Rodriguez. Then she looked at Brandon's submissions. A brief statement about wanting to be involved. No evidence of financial stability. No plan for how he'd integrate into the children's lives. Nothing substantial. "Mr. Patterson," Judge Whitfield said finally, "I've seen many cases like this. A parent who wasn't interested suddenly becomes interested when the custodial parent achieves success. This court is not here to reward that behavior." "Your Honor, with all respect," Brandon's lawyer tried. "Let me finish. Ms. Grant has raised these children alone for 2.5 years. She's provided them with an excellent home, education, healthcare, and stability. They don't know Mr. Patterson. They've never met him. Introducing him now would be disruptive and potentially harmful. But he has a right to at least meet them," Brandon's lawyer argued. "Does he? Let's talk about rights. Ms. Grant had a right to support during her pregnancy. She didn't get it. These children had a right to a father who was present from birth. They didn't get that either. Mr. Patterson chose to exercise his right to walk away and start a new family. He doesn't get to come back when it's convenient. Judge Whitfield looked directly at Brandon. If you'd come forward immediately upon learning about the children, I might view this differently. But you waited until after you saw your ex-wife. On national television after you learned about her financial success. That speaks volumes about your motivations. I was in shock when I found out, Brandon said desperately. I needed time to process it. You had 2 years to process the end of your marriage. You had months to process Ms. Grant's success after the Forbes article. You only filed this petition when you realized what you'd lost. That's not about the children, Mr. Patterson. That's about you and your regrets. She closed the file. I'm denying your petition. You will not be granted custody or visitation rights. These children have never known you, and based on the evidence presented, they're better off not knowing you. Your Honor, please, Brandon started. My decision is final. However, I'm not terminating your parental rights. If, in the future, you can demonstrate consistent interest, financial support, and a genuine desire to be in these children's lives for the right reasons, you may petition again. But that would require years of demonstrated commitment, not weeks or months. She looked at Simone. Ms. Grant, you're to have no contact with Mr. Patterson unless it's through your attorneys. If he shows up at your home or business, you're authorized to contact police. Thank you, Your Honor, Simone said. Brandon's face crumpled. This isn't fair. Life rarely is, Mr. Patterson. But you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Simone felt something release in her chest. Relief. Vindication. Justice. Brandon tried to approach her as they left the courtroom, but Patricia stepped between them. No contact means no contact, Mr. Patterson. Simone, please. Can we just talk? We have nothing to say to each other, Simone said. You lost. Accept it. I lost my children. You lost them the day you walked out. Today the court just made it official. She walked away, leaving Brandon standing in the courthouse hallway looking lost. She felt no pity. He'd had every opportunity to do the right thing, and he'd chosen wrong every single time. Outside the sun was shining. Simone got in her car, drove back to her office and picked up her children from the daycare center downstairs. Faith, Hope, and Justice ran to her with shouts of "Mama," and wrapped their small arms around her legs. Did you have a good day? She asked them. We painted. Hope said, showing her blue-stained hands. We read books. Faith added. I helped a friend who was sad, Justice said proudly. They were perfect. Happy, healthy, loved. They didn't need Brandon. They never had. That night, Simone put them to bed in their rooms with the night lights shaped like stars. She read them stories, sang them songs, and kissed their foreheads. Love you, Mama, they said in their small voices. Love you more, she whispered back. After they were asleep, she sat on her back patio with a cup of tea, looking at the life she'd built. The house she owned. The business she'd created. The children she'd raised. All of it done without Brandon, despite Brandon because of his absence. He tried to come back and she'd won. Not because she had better lawyers or more money, though those things helped. She'd won because she'd actually done the work of being a parent. She'd been there for every moment, every milestone, every midnight cry. That was the difference between them. She'd built something real. He just wanted the reward without the effort. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Saw the court update. Congratulations. You deserve this. Simone smiled. Yes, she did deserve this. Every bit of it. The success, the happiness, the victory. Brandon had thought leaving her would improve his life. Instead, he'd given her the greatest gift possible. Freedom to become who she was always meant to be. And she'd taken that gift and built an empire. 5 years after signing those divorce papers, Simone stood in her backyard watching Faith, Hope, and Justice celebrate their 5th birthday. The party was bigger than last year, with kids from their kindergarten class and their little scholars center, parents chatting on the patio, and a bounce house that was getting plenty of use. More cake. Justice shouted, running up to her with frosting on his face. You've already had 2 pieces, Simone laughed. But it's my birthday. His logic was undeniable. Fine. 1 more small piece. Then you need to drink some water. She watched him run back to his sisters, who were organizing a game with their friends. They were so different from each other, yet so close. Faith was already reading at a 2nd grade level. Hope was in gymnastics and fearless. Justice was the one everyone came to with their problems, already showing signs of emotional intelligence that amazed Simone. They didn't ask about their father anymore. They'd gone through a phase at 3 where they noticed other kids had dads and they didn't. Simone had explained it simply: some families have a mom and a dad, some have 2 moms, some have 2 dads, and some have just 1 parent. We're a just us family, and that's perfect. It had been enough. They'd moved on, secure in the love surrounding them. Amazing turnout, Rachel said, appearing at Simone's side with a glass of lemonade. Remember when it was just us at the park for their 2nd birthday? Everything's changed. Everything's better. It was true. Little Scholars now had 15 locations across 5 states, with plans for 20 more. Simone had been featured in Incorporated magazine, Time, and Entrepreneur. She'd spoken at the White House about childcare policy. She'd built a team of over 300 employees, most of them women, many of them single mothers who she made sure had flexibility and support. Her real estate company had diversified into affordable housing developments. She'd started a foundation that provided scholarships for children from low-income families. The initial inheritance of $150 million had grown to over $400 million in net worth between her businesses and investments. But more than the money or success, she built a life that felt true. Real. Hers. There's someone I'd like you to meet, Rachel said, nodding toward a man talking with some of the other parents. He was tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile. That's Trevor Michaels. His daughter Sophia is in Justice's class. He's an architect, recently divorced, and he asked about you. Simone watched Trevor pick up his daughter and spin her around, making her giggle. He seemed gentle, present, actually interested in his child's life. I'm not looking for anything, Simone said automatically. I know, but he seems nice. And it's been 5 years, Simone. Maybe it's time to at least consider opening that door. Simone had dated a little over the past few years. Casual dinners, occasional events. But nothing serious. She'd built walls so high that nobody could scale them. The idea of trusting someone with her heart again felt impossible. But then Trevor looked over and smiled, and something in Simone's chest shifted. Just a small movement, like a door opening a crack to let in light. Maybe, she said. We'll see. Later, after most of the guests had left and the triplets were playing with their new toys in the living room, Trevor approached with Sophia. Thank you for inviting us, he said. Sophia had a great time. I'm glad. Justice talks about her all the time. She talks about him too. And his sisters. Trevor hesitated. This is probably inappropriate, but would you maybe want to have coffee sometime? Just adults talking about something other than kindergarten drama? Simone looked at him carefully. That depends. Are you one of those men who suddenly becomes interested in single mothers after learning they're successful? Trevor blinked, then laughed. Fair question. But no. I asked Rachel about you 3 weeks ago before I knew anything about your business. I just thought you seemed interesting. And kind. And present at school events, which matters. Why are you single? Simone asked bluntly. Why did your marriage end? My ex-wife and I grew apart. We married too young, wanted different things. We share custody of Sophia 50-50 and we're cordial. No drama, no games. Just 2 people who realized they were better as co-parents than as partners. Honest. Direct. No red flags so far. Okay. Coffee. But just coffee. No expectations. Perfect. How about Tuesday afternoon? There's a good place near the school. Tuesday works. After Trevor and Sophia left, Rachel gave her a knowing look. You like him. I don't even know him. But you didn't say no. That's progress. Maybe it was. Or maybe Simone was just tired of being alone. Not lonely, she was never lonely with her children and her work and her full life. But alone. There was a difference. Tuesday came and Simone met Trevor at the coffee shop. They talked for 2 hours about everything except business and divorce. Books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, their kids' funny quirks. He was easy to talk to and he listened when she spoke. Actually listened, not just waited for his turn to talk. Can I ask you something? Trevor said toward the end. Why did you agree to coffee with me? You seem like someone who doesn't need anyone. I don't need anyone, Simone confirmed. But maybe that's different from not wanting anyone. I spent 5 years proving I can do everything alone. Maybe it's time to see if I want to do some things together. That's honest. I don't have time for games. Good. Neither do I. They saw each other again the next week. Then the week after. Slowly, carefully, Simone let Trevor into her life. He met the triplets in casual settings, never pushing, always respectful of her boundaries. He didn't try to be their father. He was just Trevor, Sophia's dad, Mama's friend. Months passed. Little scholars kept expanding. Simone kept building. And slowly, carefully, she let herself trust again. Not fully, not recklessly, but enough to imagine a future that might include someone else. She never heard from Brandon again. His lawyer had reached out once more about 18 months after the court case, asking if they could discuss a reasonable arrangement. Patricia had responded with a firm no, and that was the end of it. Brandon had disappeared back into whatever life he'd built with Natasha, and Simone didn't care enough to find out what happened to them. On the triplets' 6th birthday, Simone stood in her backyard again, this time with Trevor by her side. They weren't married, weren't engaged, were taking things slow. But he was there, steady and kind, and that felt like enough. Happy? He asked, watching the kids play. Yeah, Simone said. Really happy. And she was. Not because of Trevor, though he added something sweet to her life. But because she'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her, Brandon's betrayal, and turned it into the best thing. She'd found strength she didn't know she had. She'd built an empire from nothing. She'd raised 3 incredible children alone. She'd won. Not in the petty way where someone else had to lose. But in the real way, where she'd created a life so full and rich and meaningful that the past couldn't touch it. Faith, hope, and justice ran over, pulling her toward the cake. Trevor hung back, letting her have this moment with her children. Make a wish. Hope demanded. Simone looked at her 3 beautiful children, at the life she'd built, at the future stretching out before them all. She didn't need to wish for anything. She had everything that mattered. But she closed her eyes anyway and wished for what she always wished for. That her children would grow up knowing their worth, never settling for less than they deserved, always believing in their power to build whatever life they wanted. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. They'd learn it from watching her. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Not Brandon's regret, though she was sure he felt it. Not his loss, though it was profound. But her victory. Complete, absolute, undeniable. She'd taken nothing and built everything. She'd turned betrayal into triumph. She'd proven that sometimes the best thing a man can do is get out of your way. Because women like Simone don't need saving. They save themselves. And then they build empires.